Uh, all right, everyone. So we are recording this only for content purposes, though. To be honest, not sure what we're going to do with the content, if we're going to put it on the blog or not. We have to work through the logistics and the specifics of that to make sure that everything is legal and everything is right on our end. But when we do, we will let you know. So welcome to the 2023 LABBN virtual peer-to-peer. As stated before, if you could mute yourself so that you don't disrupt the speaker or anyone listening, it would be appreciated. If you have to step away for more than 5 minutes, let myself or let Terry know or Vanessa know so that we're aware that you're still here with us. No need to put your name into the chat because we're going to take attendance separately. If you were not registered for this, we're going to ask that you kindly exit or at least message me and let me know, hey, here's my registration. I don't know what happened. So I don't have to kind of virtually knock on your shoulder like, hey, you gotta go. Our speaker this morning is LeHenry Solomon, who is an LMFT. He has over 20 years experience in the field of mental health, working with various LA County departmental agencies, including mental health, child protective services, public health, as well as probation. He's supervised fatherhood programming and has worked on federal studies researching the impact of attachment between fathers and their children under the age of 3. He's trained both county and community agencies on the impact of fatherhood and on the lives of children and the overall impact it has on the community. He's currently a member on the African American Infant Maternity and Mortality Committee through the Department of Public Health, where he has helped develop and facilitates a group for fathers to decrease disproportionate numbers of mortality for African American women and their infant. He was also recently featured in a documentary titled Fatherhood, directed by Ben Greger, and he's the founder of That's My Dad. So without further ado, I am going to turn you all over to LeHenry Solomon for our first morning portion of today's peer-to-peer. LeHenry, they're all yours.
Thank you, Patrick. Good morning and welcome, everyone. It's an honor to be here, so I'm greatly appreciative and honored to be in this space and support you all as we sort of go through this process and these next 90 minutes or so. First and foremost, I do want to encourage everyone throughout the slides and the presentation. There's going to be plenty of opportunity to ask questions, plenty of opportunity to sort of just give your experience, give your space to these things, and I encourage that. So I appreciate Patrick and Terry sort of supporting that on their end, whether it's questions in the chat. Obviously, this is a virtual space in Zoom, so I can only see about 5 people of the 200 or so. So if your hand is raised or things of that nature, please let me know. And without further ado, we will go ahead and get started. Let me share my screen. All right. There we go. All right, so this is even entitled, Are You Okay? A Conversation to Support Fathers in Their Mental Health. So really, we're just going to do just that, right? We're going to talk about how do we support fathers in their mental health as it relates to them being a parent, and whether it's a new parent, first-time parent, all of those things. There's a lot of work being done now in support of fathers or the co-parenting figure as it relates to their mental health. A lot of work has been done, is continues being done, supporting new moms in terms of postpartum depression, psychoses, all of these things that come up when you have a baby. And so there's work being done to support men and the fathers in this space. And so it's really about how do we discern, how do we differentiate some of these things and what needs to be done. There you go. So we sort of went through that. I know there's a significant number of people, so we won't introduce ourselves, but welcome again. So some of the things that we'll go over today, we want to obtain tools to assess and discern if our formal supports are needed and regarding a father's mental health. So how do we discern that? How do we know if a referral needs to be made? How do we know if a referral to a group needs to be made? How do we know if just what is going on? Do we expect these sort of behaviors? Do we expect these responses from the father given the situation? So we'll talk about that. We want to have a broader and increased understanding of emotional intelligence. What does that mean? Again, what do we expect? How do we expect people to express themselves? What level of intelligence do we want people to have around their own feelings and thoughts? And then we will understand the difference in impact between emotional intelligence and emotional presence. So what do we know and what do we show? That's sort of the way to look at it. What do we know and what do we show? And then lastly, we want to identify any barriers to starting a conversation around supporting someone's mental health. And so we know at times it can be very challenging with the stigma of mental health. How do you tell someone, oh, I think you may need some support. I think you may need some additional resources without being offensive, without blaming or shaming someone. So we're going to look at those things. So one of the first things we want to look at is typical versus atypical, expected versus unexpected. So this is the first slide where when we look at these things, I really want people the opportunity to sort of share, ask questions via the chat or raising your hand. What emotions do we expect from new or first-time parents? Are there differences between new and first-time parents? So we'll sort of start there. What emotions do we expect from new or first-time parents? When we know somebody's had a baby, or we know somebody's pregnant, or we know, this is somebody's third child, this is somebody's first child. How do we expect them to behave? What sorts of feelings, emotions do we expect them to have? What emotional space do we expect them to be in? So as we're working with families, whether it's home visitation or going out to work with these families, what do we expect? What type of behaviors and emotions do we expect from them? So I'll pause there if anybody has anything to share about what they expect how people to act. Do they expect them to be calm? Do they expect them to be excited? Do they expect them to be nervous, stressed out? What do we expect from some of our families?
Hi, LeHenry.
I see excited, overwhelmed, stressed, scared. Some have self-doubt, scared because they don't know what to expect. A lot of anxious, a lot of overwhelmed, joy, mixed emotions, anxious, exhausted, a lot of anxiety, fear, a bag of emotions, wanting to learn about their baby. It varies based on the parent's situation and circumstances, uncertainty.
Perfect. And so if we just pause there, right, and at that list, how many of those, and we're just going to sort of make this statement and we'll pick this back up later. But if you think about just what we expected, how many of those would be diagnostic symptoms? How many of those are listed in the DSM, right? So when we look at that, the next question, right? Are there differences between new and first-time parents? What are some of the differences that we may expect, or that we should expect, or that we would, come to find or be typical between new and first-time parents? What are some of those differences?
We see all over the place, over worries, have more confidence, mixed emotions, have more fear, more confidence, mixed emotions, comparisons, experiences, more confident, a lot of confidence, regret, learning experiences, guilt, worried about how older children will react, feeling out of control, sleep deprived, different challenges, juggling the firstborn and a new baby, more confidence, mixed emotions, and guilt.
Perfect. So here, what we're seeing, the vast majority of those responses were more positive, right? Something in the way of confidence, right? So if we sort of have an expectation that more experienced parents or second-time parents, third-time parents, we expect a level of confidence. So if there's more fear or more anxiety there, right, then that may be more concerning for us. Just because of our expectation doesn't mean it's true, doesn't mean it's real. But we're already beginning to see now what are our expectations based on the circumstances. And we already have expectations based on the simple fact that they've had other kids. We haven't talked about socioeconomic status. We haven't talked about social support. If they have family to help them, we haven't talked about any of those. Simply the fact that you've had kids before there's already a greater level of expectation of confidence. There's a greater level of expectation of security. So we look at that. Next, we have, do we expect the behaviors of parents to reflect their time and place on the parenting journey? So we already said that in some ways, we sort of do, right? We already said they should be more confident, right? We're going to sort of note things. I also saw a couple of statements regarding, the challenges of maybe having to juggle a newborn and a child, the challenges of, potentially, the older children feeling neglected, or the older children feeling, some kind of way. They're not as a baby and the attention is going to be split. So anyone want to add to that in terms of the behaviors of parents to reflect their time and place in their parenting journey? Do we expect parents that are more experienced to behave differently, right? So did anyone want to add to that? I know we sort of covered that already. All right. So do we have different expectations of mothers and fathers as new time parents? And I'll definitely pause here. Do we have different expectations of mothers and fathers, whether it be new or first time parents? So the chat, I'm saying, of course. Absolutely, yes. All right. So I'll sort of add to that. What specific types of differences? So somebody said, yes, social pressures. What are some of the different expectations that we have? Breastfeeding work, social roles. We expect mothers to be more hands-on. Dads don't have the physical experience, they should know better. Women are nurturing, economic pressures, staying home with the baby. Yes, more expectation on the mother to care for the newborn and the father as a support. Mothers are more nurturing. Okay. Make less mistakes. The belief that they're more nurturing. We do expect mom to know what to do, dads to handle financial responsibility, juggle more activities, less anxiety. Documentation is not father-friendly for dads. Okay. Mom's expected to stay home and do majority of care. Dads only quote unquote babysit. All right. Good. We will address all of those things and some of those expectations. And as it relates to this space that we're in, it's really not about whether or not the expectations are real, not real, good or bad. It's more so about how do those expectations influence our ability or our thought process as it relates to whether or not a father may or may need some mental health. Okay, there's a whole nother sort of training and presentation on those expectations, on those roles, how valid or invalid they are, and how they came to be. But specifically today, we really want to look at how do those things that we experience or feel, how do they impact our discernment, okay? Because again, that's the key. That's the key. Do people need support? And what am I bringing to the table around support? And even as we later on, as we get into the vignettes, there are no right or wrong answers. Okay, it's really just about looking at it, looking through what comes up for me as I deal with this. All right, next question. What may cause us to question the behavior or mood of a parent, right? So what things come up, right? And essentially it's the expectations, right? The expectation. I don't expect the mom to act this way. I don't expect the dad to act this way under these circumstances. So why are they acting this way? Let me question that. Let me think about that. And so we just need to recognize that our influence, and an often term that people use is biases. And I don't like to use that term as it relates to this because it's a negative connotation, but it's more so just about our experiences and what we expect. And again, how do we know something is typical or atypical? Right, so I'll pause there. How do we know if something is typical or atypical? Any thoughts on that? How do we know something is typical or atypical? We don't, because we ask what is normal, looking at their past behavior. It varies with each family. We ask based on societal norms, family expectations, viewed as the norm. Everyone is different. It can vary with cultures. Always ask. Varies on the family, culture, and norm. Absolutely. And the bottom line of that is really there isn't a typical or atypical in and of itself. There's only typical or atypical based on my personal experience, right? So typically for me, this is what has occurred, or based on my experience or what I've known or what I've learned, this is what should or shouldn't happen. And so one of the things that can be challenging is this idea of a right or wrong or good or bad. And when we're dealing with family and with people, oftentimes it just is. And then we have to look at what do we think will best benefit the family. So diagnostic criteria. And so again, when it comes to assessing and these sorts of things, I don't want to get too much into the clinical weeds on this, because if we're not assessing clinically, if we're not trying to diagnose someone, then it really doesn't necessarily quote unquote matter in that way, right? Like we want to, misdiagnose anybody, but we do want to understand when we're talking about mental health supports and whether or not we need to make a referral, just some idea. Because what we talked about before, like how do we know some typical, atypical, what are the expectations? What do we expect from somebody's mood or behavior? How do we know to ask questions? Is it concerning or not? So these are some areas to consider, whether formally diagnosing or not, or are included but are not limited to timeframes. Okay, so when we talk about timeframes, how long has this been occurring? Okay, if somebody says, some of the things that we mentioned with the original question, what are our thoughts and feelings? We talked about anxiety, stress, those sorts of things. How long has that been occurring? Has it been occurring? Has someone mentioned have they been feeling stressed for the past 3 days, past 3 weeks, past 6 months? How often? Okay, every day, once a day, these sorts of things we want to look at. What are the time frames as it relates to this? How often is it occurring? And how long has it been occurring? And what are the number of symptoms and behaviors? Is it just anxiety? Is it just stress? Is there anger, irritability? Are there sleep disturbances? Are there appetite disturbances? Is there a decrease in joy? Is there a decrease in happiness and things that they used to do? So how many of quote unquote symptoms and behaviors are there? And is it intense? Okay, how do they describe it? Is it, did someone, start throwing things at the Subway sandwich handler because they forgot to put pickles on their sandwich? Like, what did they do? Are they yelling and screaming at their other kids? Are they yelling and screaming at their partner? Are they yelling and screaming at their boss? Is it road rage incidents? Are they getting in fights in their community? How intense is it? Has someone gone to eating 4 or 5 times a day to not eating at all? Has someone going from sleeping to, 6-8 hours a night to not sleeping at all, or vice versa? Has someone only slept 2 or 3 hours a night and now they're sleeping 6 or 7 hours a day? So what is the intensity of the behaviors? How impactful are they? And again, frequency, how often? How often are these things occurring? Okay, so for how long in terms of the time frame, 6 months, 8 weeks, and if it's daily, how often, right? So maybe it's been happening for 6 weeks, but only 1 time a week, or has it been happening for 6 weeks, every day, 5 times a day for 6 weeks? So these are some of the things to consider as it relates to some of the diagnostic criteria. And I'm seeing the chat. Okay, doesn't look like those are any questions. Okay, perfect. So to what degree, right? So areas of focus to consider in determining what, if any, level of support is needed included our home, community, and work. So to what degree and what areas of focus are these behaviors and spirits occurring? Are they occurring in the home, right? In the community, and or at work or school? So was someone saying when they're at home, their relationships with their family members at home have been disrupted. They may not want to go home. So after work, they're stopping off 5, 6, 7, 8 different places so they can decrease the amount of time at home. When they are at home, they're more irritable, they're more stressful. What other things are happening at home? Is it occurring there? Is it in the community? Are there road rage incidents? Are they getting, now this all excludes Costco parking on a Sunday, because I think we all have those issues if anyone's ever been in Costco on a Sunday. But outside of that, in the community, what's going on? Are people getting, into it in the community? Is someone, stealing diapers or doing those sorts of things in the community? Or is there a disruption in the community? And then at work or school, are people having to take off work? Are they getting reprimanded at work? Are they now late to work? Are they having problems with their coworkers and peers, supervisors? If it's school, are their grades dropping? Are there problems with their peers at school? Is there a problem with their teachers and things of that nature? Are they missing assignments? So again, where are these issues occurring? Where are the behaviors? Okay, if fathers are feeling overwhelmed or unsupported, they may act out in various ways. Somebody mentioned tobacco, substance, alcohol use. Absolutely. So are new behaviors occurring? Are things that they haven't occurring now, or is it increasing? or is it increasing? All right, so let's talk about emotional intelligence. Let's talk about emotional intelligence. So this is the ability to understand, use, and manage our own emotions in positive ways, to relieve stress, communicate effectively, empathize with others, overcome challenges, and diffuse conflict. So I'll pause here and sort of ask this question, and we can just put a number in the chat. About how many emotions can we name? How many emotions do we think people can name? If we ask, like, how many emotions are there? How many do we think? 15 to 20, 12, 4, 12, 5, 13, 30. Oh, I want to know who that is. Maria Guerrero, you know somebody who can name 30 emotions? God bless them. 10, 15, 15. I will say this. You all must know some really extremely well-adjusted people to name 8, 10, 20, 15, 10, 7, 5. Usually we go with happy, mad, nervous, sad, scared, 10, 5 to 10, 15, 15, 11, 11, 8, 12, 5 to 8, 10, 12. All right. You guys know some well-adjusted individuals. I will tell you those some pretty high numbers. Typically, it's between 5 and less than 10. If you ask people, right, just name some emotions. And I mean, like, off the bat, like, if you give somebody some time, they'll start coming up with more, especially people who are not in the social services field, right? It's typically, and there's and they all fall into 2 categories of happy or sad, or happy or angry, right? So you'll get happy, sad, angry, mad. Some people may say nervous or jealous, something like that. So as by and large, our emotional intelligence as a society is pretty low. Now, unfortunately, when it comes to males who are growing up to be reared as boys and men, it's lower than that. It's lower than that because most males and boys, they're reared to be providers and protectors. Okay, and so as a provider and protector, your ability to navigate your own emotional space is not a tool that you need, right? It's not a value. Okay, so because it's not a value, we're not taught to speak to it. We're not taught to encourage it. It's not taught, it's not going to be fostered. So we have to understand that, right? What is our emotional intelligence? And that speaks to, like, what am I feeling and how do I know? Okay, what am I feeling and how do I know? One of the big myths around emotions, the hugest myth around emotion, is that emotions are voluntary. They are not. And you'll hear people think, like, you have to control your emotions. You cannot control your emotions. Okay, emotions are involuntary. You can control how you react to the emotion, but your emotion itself, you cannot control. Okay, and so when we look at things like substance abuse, when we look at things like whatever addictions people may have, the goal of that addiction oftentimes is not to feel. So people spend a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of effort in trying not to feel. And one of the reasons why they do that is because they've been given this idea that they can control their emotions. So they feel like there's a deficit. Why am I so angry? I don't want to be angry. Something must be wrong with me that I keep getting angry, right? Or I keep getting upset. Why does this bother me so much? I should be over it by now. I'm sure most of us, or a lot of us, have heard family members or friends say, well, I want to get over that. How come I can't just get over that? And one of the things that we don't do is we don't do a good job of equating emotional trauma to physical trauma. Okay, if somebody was in an accident and they lost a limb, or they had they were scarred in some way, or something like this, we would never say to them, you still haven't gotten over that? If your leg was amputated, or you still need a wheelchair, you should be over that. We would never say that to someone. And so when it comes to emotional and mental health, it's the same thing, but we don't give ourselves the same support and care around it. We expect, that trauma was 10 years ago, 5 years ago. You're still over that. You haven't gotten over that yet. So we have to understand that emotions are involuntary. We cannot change how we feel. We can only work on how we respond to how we feel. And you'll see this in children, right? If a child pushes another kid or hits another kid, and you say, well, why did you do that? They'll say, well, they made me mad. Right? Well, they made me mad. It's like, well, that's not the response. Just because you're mad, you don't do that. So then we'll tell them, well, you need to control your anger, right? We don't talk about the behavior. We need to control your anger, so you don't do that, right? So with that, we begin to demonize emotions. We begin to demonize emotions, and that becomes along with emotional intelligence. What are others' feelings? How do I know? Right? Do I assume? What are they giving off? How do others / how does my partner communicate feelings? Right. So how do I know what they're feeling? What's their communication style? How do I know what they're feeling? Do they talk? Do they get quiet? What does that look like? And what are my boundaries and expectations in my relationships regarding communication? Okay, so how do I expect people to communicate with me? Is it okay to yell? Is it okay to scream? Is it okay to use profanity? Is it okay to call me out my name? What is my expectation? Right? Oftentimes, when it comes to these things, people will be talking and then somebody will say, well, what are you going to do about it? Right? And so it's as if the verbal communication isn't enough to communicate my level of concern. I'll pause there for just a minute. Any questions about emotional intelligence before we move on to emotional presence? Let me look in the chat. Somebody said 2 and men 5. Any questions about emotional intelligence?
I didn't get any private messages on my end, LeHenry.
Okay, perfect. All right, so we'll move on. Emotional presence. Okay, the emotional presence is the outward expression of emotion, affect, and feeling by individuals and among individuals. So what do we show? Okay, are we able to accurately present what our emotions are? And how do we feel about that? Okay, am I sad? Can I express that? What does that look like? Am I happy? Can I express that? What does that look like? And we'll talk a little bit later about cultural norms and societal norms, things like that as it relates to this. So we need to understand our presence as well. How do I express myself? Communicate my feelings. Am I able to do it? Am I able to do it in a way? Do I want people to assume under the circumstances how I'm feeling? And how do my emotions impact others? Do they impact others? Am I aware of that? And does my expression match my actual feelings and emotions? So am I consistent? Okay. Do I cry when I'm happy, smile when I'm sad, type of thing? Do I feel like I'm safe enough to sort of express my emotions? Right. So when it comes to males specifically, oftentimes this idea of being too sensitive, right? Or being emotional as a sign of weakness. I see something in the chat. Let me check. Oh, it's a massage. So again, do we feel safe? So I'll pause here for emotional presence. Any comments, thoughts around emotional presence? What are our expectations? Do we think it matters? Do we think it doesn't matter? Do we think people just we can tell how people are feeling just by their behave? Any questions regarding emotional presence? Thoughts?
LeHenry, I think it is helpful to communicate the distinction between what somebody might kind of present doesn't, and how I observe and interpret that might not be the same thing that is actually happening. And so these are really helpful questions to think about, even just for myself, as I reflect, and I think helpful for people to have some to grow in their self-awareness.
No, I appreciate that. Absolutely. And then even beyond that, the other layer of that onion is not only all of that, but then are we not, even if we're not speaking about something, are we not speaking about the same thing? So that's the other thing, right? So now it's not only am I able to communicate or receive what you're giving me, but then how do I know I'm receiving even the right thing, right? So it's like you're communicating this way, so I'm taking it that way. So now I communicate back to you, but are we starting from a place? Are we starting from the same place from the beginning anyway? And so I tell people all the time, this stuff, like being in relationships and talking about these things, is exhausting, right? I tell people all the time, one thing I left out of the bio, I'm a father myself. My son is 14, my daughter's 12. And I tell people all the time, it's one long conversation, right? It's just constant talking, constant conversation, just to sort of discern where people are emotionally. Seeing some things in the chat. Let me just read up. Okay. Body language, right? Let me see some others. people who are not affected by our emotions and what that means. I overthink that all the time. And so I would say around that, then for the person who said, there's always people who are not affected by our emotions. The reality of that also too is, as true as that is, what does that look like and how do we know? Right? So if someone says, you know, you're not impacted by my emotions, they may not express that, they may not know how to communicate that. So what we get from them as maybe not being affected or maybe apathetic, maybe just them not being able to process that and not being able to know what to do with that. Somewhat of an example is, you know, when people are crying around us, right? Or somewhere, especially kids or, you know, just people in our lives, one of the first things that we'll say is, oh, don't cry, it's okay. Well, is that for us or for them? Right? That's often for us. Like, we want them to stop crying because it makes us feel bad. But they may need to cry. They may need to get it out. But oftentimes it's, oh, let me get you a tissue, stop crying, it's okay. Right? So what have we done? We've said, number one, crying is bad, right? So you need to stop because everything's okay, right? And so again, we're letting them know, like, hey, your crying affects me. So I need you to stop, right? I need you to stop expressing that feeling because it's affecting me. I'm quick to think they don't care, dismiss their feelings and expression. Hard for dads to express their feelings to a female.
Question.
Yep.
How would you, like, if your child is having like an emotional outburst and then can't even get across what they're trying to say, to just tell them like, hey, calm down, stop crying for a second, just to communicate, like, not like, hey, your crying is driving me crazy, shush, but more so like, let's get your point across. Why are you so upset?
Is this my child or a child I'm working with?
I guess mine.
Okay. Yeah. If it's my child, I just hug them. I just hold them.
Yeah.
And let them know. And then when they're able, you know, tell me what's wrong. It's okay. One of the things that I always did with my kids when they were younger, and 14 and 12, I think I mentioned their sexes as well. I have a son and a daughter. So I never differentiated in terms of, oh, boys don't cry, girl, none of that. What I always told them was, you know, it's okay to cry, and then, you know, tell me what's wrong. Like, you have to use your words. And I would tell them, you have to use your words because no one can help you if they don't know what's wrong.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's okay to cry, but at the end of the day, you do have to communicate what it is wrong that you need support with.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, with my kids, I just held them. I know you can't always, you know, you can't do that with the kids you're necessarily working with, but you can get to their level, eye level, look them in the eye, sort of model some deep breathing. And then if you feel comfortable, if they feel comfortable, okay, depending on their age, you can say, okay, can I hold your hand? Can I touch your shoulder? And then you may.
I just work with newborns at work.
Oh, okay. Oh, but then yeah. So
that's why it was more of a personal question.
No. I mean, I don't know how clinical of an answer it is. I just held mine.
Yeah. Thank you.
They're 14 and 12, and that's what I do now.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah. I have a question, comment. So I have a child on the spectrum and they don't understand emotion a lot of times, and she's 14 now. So sometimes she'll come to me and be like, what does that mean when somebody does this? So the other day somebody texted her and she couldn't differentiate if it was a joke or if they meant what they said. And so she came up to me, she says, Mom, is this a joke or is this for reals? So with her, I have to explain emotions. She'll come to me, be like, what does that mean? Why are they doing that? And I have to literally explain what emotion is. And then if I'm upset with her, I have to explain, look, Mom's upset because you did this and this is what it means. And then she'll kind of start asking questions. So I liked how you bring up just the importance of expressing yourself emotionally, because some people are unable to, and that's a reality. Just yesterday, she had a few little friends over, and all her friends are on the spectrum, and I heard them cursing. They're middle schoolers, and I heard them cursing in the room. And I said, hey, that's enough with that language. I don't want to hear that language. A typical kid would know, oh, don't curse in front of the parents. They curse. They do that at school. Don't do it in front of the parents. But they did not recognize that behavior as being like, they didn't know how to be sneaky about it. So then they answered me, and it was I kind of chuckled. One of her friends said, oh, sorry, Mrs. Cardoza. She goes, we will whisper it next time. And so I was like, in my head, I'm like, no, you're not supposed to say it, period. But I just, how they deal with emotions and how they deal with communication is a little different. So I kind of wanted to bring that out too, because we deal with a lot of kids on the spectrum nowadays. And then that's, you know, teaching them how to communicate is a challenge sometimes.
It is, and I see the hand raised. It is a challenge, and it's also just, in my experience, just so sort of refreshing is not the right word, but it's so sort of clear, right? That the nuances often of a lot of things around communication that we take for granted are taken away, right? So just like the young lady saying to you, like, okay, we'll whisper. Like if you don't want to hear it, we'll make it so you can't, right? Which is different than like, okay, that's not appropriate language. You know what I'm saying? So it's a wonderful thing. I'll never forget my daughter. She was like 5 or 6 years old, and something was going on, and she was like, "Dad, you're making me upset right now." And I was like, "What? Like you're 5? You know what I mean? Like, what are you talking about?" But just in a way that she was learning to sort of navigate that thing, right? To be like, you know, even though she was wrong, but it doesn't matter. It didn't matter to her, and I was glad she was able to say that, right? Like, and so again, to your point, like giving the kids specific language to sort of say what it is. And I think oftentimes what adults do is by our presentation, by our nonverbal communication, we let kids know whether or not they can say certain things before, and then we'll ask, then we'll tell them to tell us. But we've already given off this vibe, if you will, that it's not okay, that what you're going to say isn't okay. I see a couple of hands. Is it Satari? I don't want to.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate your presentation today. It's just like such a rich and opening, you know, my feelings so much, because I like the way you use the word my feeling and my emotional, how is my feeling is, you know, and what other people think. And I appreciate you use the word my. My is focused on myself, or, you know, for because when we're working in this field, I feel that we don't want to look at other people's faults and what's wrong with them. And is fine, I'm perfect, but I appreciate you help to look at myself, because you use the word eyes and me, and I appreciate that. It helped me focus on today training is focused on me and on myself, and how I can reflect on my feelings. And a lot of time I attend like mental health training or other thing. It's just about looking at other people feelings, but not stating, you know, how am I feeling or how my feeling is. I just want to say I appreciate your presentation today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. I see another hand. Benny.
I like the way you were saying how you hug your children, because I relate to that. Like I have toddlers, so they have big emotions. My thing is that for example, I do what you do. Like my 5-year-old son will throw a whole tantrum, and I hug him and I let him cry it out. I don't tell him to stop crying, I let him be. And he'll tell me that I don't love him anymore, or he'll tell me, you're not my mommy anymore. And I don't know what to say to that. Like I just like, that's not nice. Like, I understand that you're upset. That's not nice. But sometimes I don't know how to like get back from that, because even though like he's upset, it also upsets me that he says those things, because I still give him the space that he needs to cry it out.
No, I appreciate that. And what I did with mine, I don't know if it's right or wrong, but this is what I did. I just told him, take it up with God. That's what I told him. I would, you know, they'd be upset with me. I'd say, well, take it up with God. So you got, I'm your dad. You know what I mean? Because what I want them to understand is that it's okay, right? I mean, there are things that my children have said when they're angry that before I had kids, I would have been like, that's not acceptable. That's just, kids only got so many bullets in the gun, right? And so when they're mad at you, all they can say is they hate you. I wish you weren't my dad. I mean, that's about it. And so I would say that's okay. You know, you don't have to like me. I'm your dad. You just have to do what I say and take it up with God, right? And then 10 minutes later, they don't hate me anymore. right? I mean, they're kids. So, you know, letting them sort of be upset, say what they have to say, those things in the moment when they're angry is fine. And then we go back to that and we talk about level of respect and I'm your dad. And as they've grown, those type of statements have obviously gone away, right? Because they have more language now. They're able to sort of express themselves in a more appropriate way when they're angry. But what I found is that as the adult in their lives, I have to model that. So if they start sort of using insults or those sorts of things, if I give that back to them, then that's all they're going to have, right? And so they're not going to be able to sort of develop a sense of empathy, a sense of awareness, a sense of those sorts of things, right? And so I've just sort of used that to say in the moment, like, okay, that's fine. Like, you can't change it, I can't change it. So you're okay. I'm always here for you. I love you, and you know, it'll be okay. So that's what I've done. I see another hand. Is it Tamara?
Yes, Tamara. I have a dad. He's in his middle 30s, and at birth, he was given custody of the baby. He had no idea that him and mom were going to raise this baby together. And the challenges that I have with him is like feeding the baby too soon. And he uses things like, well, that's how they did with me, and I did that with my baby sister. So it's a lot of culture and traditions that, and he says, and I came out fine. And what do you say to that when grandma is telling him, yes, you can do this?
Yeah.
But he's very nourishing with the baby, very connected with the baby. So it's just that some things weren't done with him and his siblings growing up, and he doesn't think that he has to do it with his son.
Yeah, I found that to be extremely challenging by way of just working with people and different things like that. I know one of the things that would come up is back to sleep, right? Like, don't put kids on their stomach. And I know for a lot of people that was a huge deal. People, you know, people like, I laid that baby down on their stomach for, you know, and nothing ever happened. And so
he said that too. That one too.
That one too. Yeah, there are these things. And what I've done is really just validate and support and say that yes, those things work. They have worked for a long time. And these are new ways to do it. And these ways are also helpful. And then you use things like email versus, you know, what we call now snail mail, right? Like, snail mail still works. You can still write a letter and they'll still receive the information, but email is much more efficient, right? And so just using sort of those examples to say that it's not, one of the things that I found that is critical, not to sort of make it a right or wrong or good or bad, but just, it's just different, right? There's a different way to do it. And the responsibility of our choices are our own, right? So if now that you have these tools, you know, we know emails out there. You can still send letters if you like, right? But now you're choosing to have the information take longer to get to the individual as opposed to an email. Choice is yours. And you can discern whether or not one choice is better or worse than the other. But I think really just supporting parents to say, like, look, these are new ways. These are ways that we have found to be successful and found to be more efficient. And so, you know, the choice is yours. Now, obviously, when issues of safety are greater, then we have to be sort of more rigid and say, like, look, we know now this just isn't as safe as we thought it was, right? And so, and, you know, and then we have to bring up numbers and research. But at the end of the day, people choose to do what they're going to do. But,
Right.
but we can be a little more direct and rigid around certain things. Like, we know, you know, when we didn't have the information before, and we have the information now around those issues of safety.
Thank you. Thank you. That was good information. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So with all this being said, where do our communication styles come from? And we've talked about this a little bit already, right? Culture and traditions. How do we normally communicate? What's traditional ways in which we communicate, right? In different families, cultures, experiences, it's very different, right? You know, some of us grew up where, you know, children should be seen and not heard, right? So what is your ability to communicate in those instances? What do we expect? How do we expect partners to communicate to each other, right? Regardless of sex or gender, what does that look like? What's the traditional way for them to communicate? And communicate about what? And what does that look like? Faith and belief systems, right, can also greatly influence how we communicate, ways in which we're supposed to communicate. And then our immediate environment and social norms, right? You know, you're going to let him talk to you like that. You're going to let her talk to you like that, right? How do we communicate what's expected, what's not expected? In terms of communication styles, it's extremely different now as it relates to, you know, being able to talk to somebody, right? And so dating myself a little bit, you know, when I was like in middle school, if you call somebody, the phone could have just been busy. That was it. You got a busy signal. They, you know, they didn't know you called. None of that. So, and you fast forward now, you know, if people don't pick up right away, they text, they expect immediate response in terms of communication. Immediate response, immediate response, immediate response. And so the societal norms are different in terms of our communication style. So that means the level of expectation is different around communication styles. So I'm seeing a couple new things in the chat. Kids are supposed to obey. Bring this up a little bit. I'm trying to break the culture, hitting, yelling, and the best that I can be because I didn't have that. Absolutely. Yeah, the idea that kids are supposed to obey. And so when we talk about that, just obedience, that's kind of like this, that blind obedience. And it's a challenge. Now, the other side of the coin, I will tell you, is a challenge. I tell people all the time, I've got my daughter more so than my son, the two best negotiators on the planet. So when you open that communication style, there is going to be more of asking questions. Well, why this? Why that? Why not this? Why can't we do that? What's going on here? Well, what about if we did this as opposed to that? Won't that work? So now when we have these communication styles, we have to also have the responsibility of what that comes into play and what is cultural, what is traditional. And so with these things in mind, again, going back to it, what do we expect from our parents that we work with? Our men and males in particular. Do we expect them to be openly communicative, right? If we ask them, how are you doing, right? Name of the presentation, are you okay? What do we expect if we ask people, are they okay? Typically, we expect them to say yes, or how are you? I'm fine, I'm okay, right? And so these are the things that come up in relationship to this style. Seeing some more things in the chat. I agree, or that they're rebellious. It's very challenging because older adults see it as disrespect. Yes, and if you're okay with them expressing boundaries or feelings, you're bad. You're a bad permissive parent. Let's talk about that a little bit. Let's talk about that. The idea that expressing them, allowing kids to express themselves, makes you bad or permissive. That if you allow space for conversation, space for dialogue, space for questioning, that makes you bad or permissive. Where do we think that comes from?
They're just not, children are not obeying. And if a parent does allow them space to speak up and share their feelings and maybe not follow something, then you're seen as a bad parent because you're not laying down the law. You're not, you know, nipping it in the bud. You're not disciplining them, or you're not punishing them. And that's where it becomes very hard for some parents, because they're trapped between, they're hearing what the older people are saying, and then they're trying to follow their new way of parenting.
No, absolutely. It's interesting. There's a belief out there that you can make kids do stuff, right? Like just make them do it. And what we know to be true for us parents is very scary, is that you can't make kids do anything. That kids behave based on the relationship. Now, behavior modification aside, right? When we know punishments and reinforcements, we know how that works cognitively. But as a result of children on a day-to-day basis, it's really the relationship, right? And kids work so much harder to receive your praise from people that they know love them and care about them than they ever work trying to avoid getting caught doing something bad. And so it's been really challenging in some of the parents that I work with to get them to have their trust and faith in that, as opposed to this iron fist that they want to sort of have, because the iron fist is a lot easier. It's a lot clearer, right? But what happens is as kids grow, they just find ways to avoid the iron fist. So now their focus isn't behaving appropriately. It's like, how do I not get caught? Right? So their morality in terms of their cognitive abilities is extremely low at this point. They don't care whether or not something's good or bad or right or wrong. They're just going to care whether or not we'll get caught. And you will hear kids say that, oh man, why not? We aren't going to get caught. That's what they say. Oh, we aren't gonna get caught. So-and-so's not looking, the parents aren't home. So it's now you've gone away from, is this the right thing to do? So now when we're talking to kids about integrity, when we're talking to kids about those sorts of things, it's like, yeah, I get that, but I'm only concerned about if I get caught. Because the bad thing comes if I get caught. The bad thing doesn't come because I have to look at myself in the mirror. It's like, that's really not who I want to be. Right. And so really sort of talking to parents around that piece of it has supported me in terms of shifting that idea. Right. It's like, well, what do you want the message to be? Do you want the message to be to your kids, don't get caught? Or do you want the message to be to your kids, this is who you are as a person. This is who you want to be as a person. These are the decisions you have to make, whether or not you get caught or not. So that's one of the things that come up regarding that. They have to want to be in a relationship with the person for positive reinforcement to work. It starts with relationship building skills. Let's see a couple more of these traditions. When a family gets upset that you don't yell or hit your kids because expect you to do so because you're letting them walk all over you, right? The idea of physical discipline, those sorts of things, which is a whole nother presentation that we can talk about, and the societal and cultural norms that come with that. Is it good or bad? All of that wonderful stuff. So one thing in the chat, discipline to teach acceptable versus unacceptable behaviors at a very young age. Good. All right. Oh, so here we go. Oops, I see a hand. Cheryl.
Yes. Also is the understanding that from some aspects, because not everybody actually does believe in the fact that as the children are growing and maturing, they need more of the parent time than because what some parents don't actually accept is that as the children are maturing, they need you more. Some parents feel that as they get into the adolescent stage, they're older, they're more mature, they're okay, they should be more independent. They understand. I gave them the tools, I taught them, they should know what to do. They're okay. And they leave the child to that independence because they're okay. And the children actually need you more when they get in the adolescent stage. And a lot of parents tend to just leave the child to be instead of literally starting to be that nurturing parent that you are. And that's why children start to, as you say, navigate through that how do I not get caught stage, because I know I can do whatever. I'm not in her eyes, or I'm not in his eyes. So what can I now do more to not get caught in so many things? And it's because not that you're not being the parent, it's just children know I'm really not so much the one that they're paying attention to. They're paying attention to my toddlers, brothers and sisters or whatever, because I'm not the focus anymore. And that's the time when you really want to be focusing more, because that's when I can actually be the center of attention to the streets and anybody else who wants to take me under their wings.
Absolutely. And what's even interesting about that is you hear so many parents say, when you're 18, this and that. When you're 18, this and that. And so it's, to your point, it's almost a race to get them to that point, right? So we're adolescents, 13, 14, 15, whether or not we've consciously said this or done this, now we're in the countdown. So it's 5 more years to you're 18, 4 more years to you're 18, 3 more years to you're 18. And because there's been this huge expectation of when you're 18, you can do what you want. When you're 18, you can get out. When you're 18, this and that. When you're 18, when you're 18, when you're 18. So now, when we get to adolescence, we're literally counting that down. And the kids are counting that down, right? And so it's like, okay, well, when I get 18, I can do what I want. Or when I get, so then that now what? So now you set this situation up. Now the kid's 18, they're in the house still for whatever reason. So now you got 18 years of telling them when they're 18, they can do what they want when they're 18, now they stay in your house, and now there's a problem. Because now you got 18 years of telling them what they could do what they want, supposedly this and that, the third. Now they're like, well, okay, I'm 18 now, so you said I could do what I want. You said this and that, you said this and that. So to your point, absolutely, right? And so if we set it up as if, again, it's a countdown to 18, it's a countdown to when they leave, then the only natural reaction is to, as they get older, to pull back. But if you're here to say, I'm your parent regardless, I don't care how old you are, I don't care what the situation is, I'm an influence in your life and I'm going to be that, then that remains throughout, right? And so it's really supporting parents again to say, like, what do you want from your children? And parents owning that. They may say, like, I just want to be done. Then you get what comes with that, right? You get what comes with that. A couple of other things in the chat I'm seeing. Okay, people just agreeing. Because they're more independent, there are more opportunities to get in trouble. Absolutely. I'm gonna say that, but then when you're 18, you have your own place and money, you get to do what you want. Absolutely. You know, one of the things I've told my children is the adult and age don't go together, right? You're not an adult until you can fully take care of yourself. I don't care how old you are. And everybody needs, and I told them, I was like, look, I'm not talking about from time to time, you know, everybody needs support, but I'm saying, in generally speaking, if you can do for yourself complete independence, at that point in time, you're an adult. Until then, you're not. So, you know, be that as it may. But that's the reality of it, right? There's a cost and responsibility to make decisions. And it's one thing to feel like you can make those decisions, but if you don't have the ability to be responsible and take care of those decisions, then not quite there yet. All right, so here's something I wanted to share just to give some context to what we're sort of speaking to. Let me share my sound.
Yo, comedian Michael Jr. here. As you know, I just flat out enjoy doing comedy. But one of the things I love way more than that is being a dad. Not too long ago, I'm going through some video footage and I run into this video of my youngest daughter being born.
Oops, I'm sorry about that.
Now, of course, I was there. I actually took the video, but I had never really experienced it from this perspective before. Now look, we're in the hospital room. She's sticky and she's baby and all that stuff, and she's in the middle of crying. And then I speak up. I start talking to her, and watch how she responds when she hears my voice. It's okay, Portland. Look, I'm right here. It's okay. It's okay. I'm right here. I'm right here. We're doing just fine. It's okay. It's okay. I'm right here. Right here. Yeah, it's okay. It's okay, baby. It's okay. That was pretty awesome. So check it. A few minutes later, the nurse starts working on her, puts her pamper on her, and I'm not saying anything, and she actually starts to cry again. Then I speak up, she hears my voice, and stops crying, like again. But I want you to notice what else happens after I tell her that I love her.
Mom hold you.
Portland, it's okay. It's okay. It's good. It's good. It's good. I'm right here. I'm right here. I am right here. I love you. I love you. I love you. Yeah, I'm right here. I'm right here. It's okay. It's okay. That's just phenomenal. Like, whoa. Here's the thing. We'll always have times where we're not as comfortable, probably even to the point of tears, where life is just heavy. The key thing to do in those moments is to be still and listen for the Father's voice, because He is trying to talk to you. And I can tell you what He wants you to know is that He loves you. All you got to do is open your eyes. Happy Father's Day.
So so many things in the chat. And so that sort of I'll pause there if people want to share thoughts, comments, anything that they want to speak to regarding that video. Same thing happened.
Yeah, I think this is such a beautiful short video of like what we can share with our fathers, of what it's like from another dad's perspective, because being a female home visitor, reality is my culture is women. That's what I know, and that's who I connect with first point. And so having a real example of a father being vulnerable on a screen for about 2 minutes is such a great conversation starter and awareness of yeah, just that first conversation to be having with them. So thank you for sharing that.
Of course. I think one of the things is the challenging reality is what's lost in that video is that he was even there in the first place. And so one of the things that a lot of work is being done and has to be done is to get men to understand their value from conception. So a lot of the work that I do is specifically within AIM and the public health, which is addressing the infant maternity and mortality rates among African-American women. I know it's been in the news recently. A young lady named April lost her life at Centinela Hospital, I believe, and she was there for 10 hours complaining about pain. That's another presentation. But the idea of the male involvement from conception, right? Because most men don't even believe we're needed. Most doctors won't speak to us being needed. Like we're a luxury, right? So if the dad is there, that's better, but he's not needed. And so as it relates to these issues, we really have to start holding males accountable to the idea of you are necessary, right? Another example is like a good dad. We've all heard that term. Oh, he's a good dad. We never hear she's a good mom. Not because moms aren't good, it's because mom by definition is good. Moms can't get away with the things dads can get away with. Just can't, right? If a mom was to ever do some of the things that dad did in this society, the fabric of time would split, right? I mean, literally the world would end because there's an expectation amongst moms for moms, and we need to get dads to have that same expectation. Like, it's not a luxury for you to be in the delivery room. It's mandatory, right? It's as necessary, right? It's not, okay, well, you were there, good. Oh, I'm so glad to see you, Dad. Like, no, where else would you be? Where else should you be? And it's unfortunate because even a few years ago, there was a baseball player who missed a game because his wife was giving birth. And people are like, I mean, why is he missing a game? Like, there's nothing he can do there. And unfortunately, now we've changed to the point where there was an announcer for the college football playoff who literally left the broadcast live because he got a text from his wife saying she was going into labor. So he left live to go, and everybody was like, that's the right thing, like, whatever. So we're making small steps as a large society. But to your point, Jessica, we really have to do more work on the day-to-day, on the groundwork, to saying, this is your expectation. Like, you have to be here. You have to be around these things. And culturally, how do we support that? And I've done some work, and there's other presentations and trainings around that piece of it. We can talk about that a little more. I see the chat, let me see. Yeah, dads get praised for the must. It's expected from moms. Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I'll never forget. I was at the park one year with my kids. They were like 6 and 4, and it was like youth sports or whatever. And I was fortunate. I was, coaching on my kids' teams, that whole deal. And there was a woman came up to me, and I had seen her, so, because when you go to the same parks and recs or whatever, you see the same families, blah, blah, blah. And so she comes up to me one day at the park, and she was like, you are always with your kids. Like you are always with your kids. They're everywhere. And my initial response was wanting to be like, yeah, they're 6 and 4. I try not to let them navigate the world by themselves just yet, right? But I just said, oh, thank you, yeah, blah, blah, blah. But for her, that was a thing. Like she thought she was complimenting me, and I get where she was coming from. But that's the idea, right? I'm almost positive she didn't say that to any of the moms. Like, oh my God, are you with your kids again? I always see like it's ridiculous, right? But again, that's sort of where we are as a society, and we need to sort of move away from that, where we expect dads to be as present as moms. I see a hand. Is it Dosa?
Yes, thank you, LeHenry. I just wanted to point out, and that's awesome that we're having this conversation all together, because I think of like teen parents, which our program works with sometimes too, and as young as 13, 14, 15, like the conversations around that too, how you were saying comparisons, and sometimes the double standard that applies there, where teen mothers are seen as like, oh, like you're responsible, like you're so responsible. How can you get pregnant so young? Or how can this, how can that? And like teen men or boys or fathers are viewed as like, oh, you're so responsible. Like going back to what you were saying, you're so responsible. You're always there for your kid. You're, you fought for your child, whatever. And I think that like leads to, the importance of having conversations around reproductive health, for both men and women, and men also, fathers also being included in those conversations, so I like that you brought that up. Thank you.
No, I appreciate that. I mean, one of the things that I'm trying to do now, and some of this work that I'm doing again with AIM, is having people understand that males need to be the tip of the spear around reproductive justice. And I know that sounds like counterintuitive, right? But we do, because everything that goes on in that space is related to our position in that situation, right? So, we talk about teen pregnancy. One of the things that I really want to do with the school districts is work to have these classes and talk about with males, like your responsibility in terms of that, right? And where does your responsibility begin, and where does it end in terms of your level of influence around a woman's choice, a woman's body, like all of those conversations, all of those questions, right? Like all of those things coming up, and males understanding your role is critical and vital. It's not just a woman's issue, right? If you just kind of say, oh, well, whatever, it's silence is compliance around these things. And so males really need to learn and understand their role, again, from conception and preconception in terms of dating and relationships all the way through the birth. And so when we look at that, the paternal impact, by about 24 weeks, your baby can hear sounds from outside, and that includes your voice. Substantial father involvement from at least the first month after birth promotes better language development, better cognition skills among toddlers and young children. Expectant fathers can be influential advocates for breastfeeding by playing a critical role in encouraging mother to breastfeed the newborn infant. Babies with strong attachments to their dads tend to have fewer behavioral problems later on. And even from birth, children who have an involved father more likely to be emotionally secure, be confident to explore their surroundings, and as they grow older, have better social connections. One of the most critical things as it relates to those points, it doesn't matter where the dad resides. It does not matter where so he does not have to be in the home for these things to come to play. So in the fatherhood engagement, fatherhood involvement work that's being done and that I do, it's understanding that the protective factors of a positive father figure are not related to residence. Okay, so it doesn't matter where the dad lives. It's about the positive influence, the positive interactions. Okay, so these things are critical. See a couple things in the chat. Okay, I'd like to put some handouts. Let me see. I see a question. Can we get the sites for the impact of dads? I can give you that information. Yes. The interesting thing about resources for this stuff is there's not a lot of work being done with fathers and father impact. So some of this stuff is all, I think some of it's like 2003 up to 2012, but there's no new research being done. There's a site called fatherhood.gov, I think it is, and they just sort of update statistics. But in terms of new actual research being done, it's basically slim to none research around that. It's more anecdotal, those sorts of things, but I will get you any information you like regarding that. I see a hand, Cindy.
Yes, I just wanted to say thank you for this information that you provided, because it just feels yes, the population that we tend to see is usually moms, at least in our program with Welcome Baby. But when you mention dads, it just feels like it empowers them, because many times, as I mentioned, the moms that we see, they're multitasking. They're having so many roles at different times. And maybe I'm wondering if that's also taken a little bit of the empowerment from the dads. And so maybe the male figures that are in their lives or they're involved with, they rely on them. And so, but the information that you're sharing, it just seems it's the opposite. It should be an empowerment for the male figures so that they can lead in that sense, and also alleviate maybe some of the burden on the woman's side, on the mom's side. But just the information that you've shared, it just feels very impactful. And I wish there was like even current information currently, because I think that would make a very big impact, like even in the mental health well-being of the mom.
Absolutely.
That fathers can take that kind of role and lead in that way. So thank you.
Of course. I see Lydia and Jasmine.
Yes. Hello. I wanted to say I see young people today, they're kind of breaking those gender roles. When I grew up, it was different. A male had his type of job in a relationship and a woman had hers, and you don't mix the two. And if you did, something was wrong with you. It's different today. And I see it in my own daughter. I have a daughter who's 28. She has a 4-year-old now, a young son. And even today, she's teaching him, skills so he can be a very nurturing parent or father or husband when he's older. The other day, last month, we went to the store and he picked out a baby doll. And I said, in my old way of growing up, hey, is Chris going to be okay with that? The baby's dad. And she said, I don't care if he's okay with that or not. I teach my son that it is okay to play with baby dolls as well. So I said, okay. So she brought the baby doll home and little Christian was playing with it. And Chris, the dad, said, hey, why'd you let him pick out a baby doll? And so something my daughter said, I found, wow, I'm so proud of you. I never thought about it that way. She said, yeah, there's nothing wrong with him playing with the baby doll. If anything, it's going to teach him how to be a nurturing father when he grows up, because he'll learn how to hold the baby, kiss the baby, pat the baby, change the baby. So kind of a light went on in me, like, you're right. And so after she said that to Big Chris, he was okay with it. So kind of wanted to share that.
No, thank you. Thank you, Jasmine.
I think just to add on to what the two other ladies were saying, it's just a big thing that I feel holds back men from parental involvement is just cultural norms. I think that's just kind of what it comes down to sometimes. Like, I'm so sorry, I didn't catch the name the person before me said. It's so ingrained into our cultural upbringing that women are supposed to do a certain set of things with their family, whereas the men are supposed to do others. It's just very, the line is very well defined, so as mentioned before, it's just now as times have gone on, we are able to break those social norms a little bit more, and we're seeing a lot more involvement from the parents. And I do see that in some of my families that I serve, that the dads are a little shy to join in, but I'm like, oh, come on, like, join us. Let's participate in all of this together, and it's so much more fun for the child and the family.
Absolutely, thank you. Is it Taisha?
Yeah. Hey, LeHenry, it's Taisha. Good to see you. I just wanted to, I guess, share a short story if I could. I teach child development, and even when I was a preschool teacher, it was a challenge for some fathers to see male children playing and holding babies and pushing carts, and even noticing that in the dramatic play area, sorry, that's the context, preschool classroom, where some of the young girls were telling the boys, you can't be in this area. And because this is for girls only. There was a father, this was told to me from one of my students, that came in and saw his son pushing a stroller with a baby in it. And he had a lot of problems. And short version of this, the teacher expanded his not breaking norms. I'm kind of struggling with that. So I don't want to say breaking, but expanding the opportunity to explore what modeling looks like for this parent. Was this child was transported by his father every day to preschool in a stroller. So this child, which is very typical and normal at this age, models what he's living and experiencing. Not that it was some far off thought that this could lead down a different road than maybe what the father had. The child was modeling a lived experience, and he sees his father and knows his father pushes him in the stroller to get to school. And so I think sometimes, for me personally, I try not to use breaking traditions and norms. I try to look at it as a expanding knowledge and sharing opportunity to see it differently, reframing it, because a lot of our children do model what they see, and some of our fathers model what they see. So when you're breaking that, you can actually be breaching a opportunity to share in this relationship, in that attempt to break. And I might be kind of over focusing on the word, but I'm trying to use more strength-based words. Let's expand, let's explore, let's see this in different ways. Because when they see that child is modeling them, perhaps it gives them some confidence that in their own fathering skill. So I think sometimes we have to look at that differently, and I think moms and grandmothers do too, and us women, we might need to see that differently too, and how we can expand instead of forcing change. No one wants to be forced to change all the time. There has their own kind of implications and struggle with that. So just something I wanted to share.
No, I appreciate that. And Ebony, I see your hand. And I think one of the things is we are who we are in terms of our worldview. And I think it's really about the self-awareness of that and what that means for us to have the conversation. Is it a cultural thing? Is it a expected thing? Is it a norm thing? What are things that we want? Is it a safety issue? And again, a dad seeing that, not recognizing like, oh, he's pretending to be me, as opposed to like, oh, he's acting like a mom, right? And so even that statement is the implications of this entire presentation, right? Like the idea that that's what moms do. And there are some realities that is what moms do. So the question we have to ask ourselves is it okay? Is it good? Is it bad? What does that mean? All of those sorts of things come in. And it's really about the self-awareness we have to have those conversations and what does it mean? And I think as best we can, removing whether or not it's good or bad, especially as those of us in the field who work with families. Because I think as we were sharing earlier, if we bring into whether or not I think is good or bad, that's going to impact the relationship we have in work. Ebony, I see your hand.
Can you guys hear me? Okay, so I view fatherhood as differently because I have a brother who has 2 daughters, and I have noticed, like, even with friends who have children, that the bond is broken between the child and the father because the mom tends to hold the child back from the father in the first few years of that child development. So my question is, like, how do you support a father who does not always have access to his child? And also, male tend to, can I say, like, move with emotions? Well, how do you like control their emotions that way? It won't it won't become a legal issue in the future. Therefore, they won't end up, having access to their child, because I tend to notice that when the child is with the mom is primary caregiver, and the dad reacts, it end up becoming a legal issue, and then a restraining order gets involved, and then they get custody of the child only twice a month. I'm like, how can you have a strong relationship with your child twice a month, and then down the line when the child is 10, you notice that they're not connected, the father and the child. So how do you support the dad in that situation?
So a couple of things. What I found is really expressing it's quality over quantity. It's quality over quantity. And that's in terms of time, right? And so unfortunately, if you do the numbers, right? And so again, in a lot of the work that's being done with dads and getting them to understand, because you can look at a dad, let's say, who's in the home, right? But let's say this dad is working two and a half, 3 jobs, okay? And the kids are in school all day. If you take the amount of time that dad actually has with his kids versus, let's say, a dad who only maybe has, I even hate using the word visitation because you don't visit your kids, but parental time with their kids, every weekend or every other weekend. The shocking thing is the hours aren't that different. The amount of actual time isn't that different. And so it's really about dads understanding, when I spending time with my kids, how valuable do I make it? Am I utilizing every opportunity I have with my kids to make an impact? Because your experiences are relative to everything, right? So if I'm seeing my kids every day, their expectation of our relationship is different from a kid who sees his father every other weekend. Because kids know, I only see him a few times. So if you make those few times amazing, impactful, and I'm not talking about just Disneyland and those type of things, but just like influential. I remember my dad teaching me this. I remember my dad teaching me that. A kid isn't going to say, my dad, taught me these things, but we only saw each other this amount of time. They're just going to be in a situation like, my dad taught me that. My dad taught me these things. And so it's really about fathers understanding the impact that they have in the amount of time they have versus just focusing on the amount of time, period. Because that's unfortunately something that they have to change through the legal system, and really understanding, to your point around, how do dads not operate through emotion and things of that nature, understanding that they're going to be upset, they're going to be angry, but they have to understand their behavior and what is that going to result in, right? What is that going to result in? And so there's a lot of work being done around supporting fathers through the custody system and things like that. And culturally, a lot of fathers, we not volunteering to go to the courthouse. We're not volunteering to go through those things. And so unfortunately, a lot of times there's many steps taken backwards, trying to do things ourselves and trying to work things out ourselves, as opposed to just going down there and saying, this is what I want, this is the time I want to spend with my kids, and getting it in writing that has to be sort of dealt with, as opposed to not doing that. And then the system gets involved anyway, but now it got involved in a way that's much more challenging from the father's perspective. I don't know if that was helpful.
Yeah, it was helpful.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Is it Jocelyn?
Yes. Hi. I just kind of want to, I guess, add on or kind of comment on what Ebony's talking about, because I 100% see what she's speaking on, because I think something with this whole dad, I think that there is the information there, but I don't know if I misunderstood from what she's talking about, but it's I think how do we support these dads that are actually trying to be there? And I think first off, it starts off literally off the system, because even if there are dads that are going to the system asking for the support, they're not providing them that support, because again, overall, it seems like we're just helping moms. It's when it is custody involved, I think a lot of that support is going to moms. So I think that also kind of takes away from that. It's when they do ask for the help or they are looking for the help, that support isn't there for them. So it's kind of when it comes to that, when you're dealing with the system as a father and you're dealing with also another parent with co-parenting, and they're not helping you be able to be the dad you want to be. It's like, even though you're looking for the help, it's not like, sometimes for them, it might feel like, okay, I'm not, how does this work? How can I be a dad if I'm not being allowed to be a dad? So even like us, for like parent educators, like, how do we help them if it's really that they are trying to get the help for themselves, for their child, but it's everybody else around them that's not supporting them, like the main people, like the system, the co-parent. I think that's like another big thing. Like, we can help them, we can try to help them, but again, it's like the people that are around them. And I don't know, I just, like, as a parent educator, like, I'm just now starting this role. I really think that we should be able to like not just provide this information, but also help moms understand, because we do see a lot of single moms sometimes, and we need to help them understand too, like, let the dad play a role too, let the dad be there for their child, let them also learn how to get involved, like, let them, they might make mistakes just like us moms, or women make mistakes, men can do that as well. Like, it's all a learning process. So it's not just like helping the dad, but also helping moms understand, like, it is okay for dad to be involved. It is okay for him to make mistakes and find his own help as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think to that question, and this is going to sound like a very almost cop-out answer or whatever, but the reality of it is we really have to support dads in controlling what they can control. Because being upset or focusing on things that you can't change just isn't helpful. And there's a space for that. I mean, I run a group. I mean, there's father groups and stuff like that we'll hopefully get to. I know I'm running short on time. Around that, there's places and supports where dads can sort of go to speak to these things and how difficult it is, but the energy has to be on making an impactful presence when they're around their kids. But fighting something that you can't control can't be the focus to support your kids. And you know, dads need support around that. So yeah, I see a couple hands, Tamara, and then Shina.
Yes, I just want to say quickly that I had a father, well, a cousin, and he was having a hard time getting visitations with his son, and he got a lawyer, and they went to children's court, and him and the mom were not getting along, and it was understood in the courts, and they did the exchange at the police station. That's what they did, and he fought for it. He had to go to court, but he did get the visitations with his son, time with him during the summer, weekends. The courts did allow it, but you have to go through all of those steps. And sometimes some dads or moms don't know that that is an option, but I know a dad who really did. Yeah, and he spent just as much time with his son as the mom. And when the son went to high school, he told his mom he wanted to go live with his dad, and he did. Now, was it an easy road? No. But it can be done.
Can be done. Thank you. Thank you. Is it Shina? Shina, I don't want to.
Yes, Sheena. So I was wondering, and I want to know your input. So I have a parent, and she has been sharing with me that, oh, you know, when I was a child, my dad would say, like, I would be coming, and then he never showed. And so it would be like that her whole entire life. And it seems like what she's sharing is that, you know, FOB is the same thing. Oh, I'm gonna come and get her, the baby, and then then he doesn't show. And then she says, well, I don't want that. I don't want a relationship like that for my child, because I know how it was when I was a child. And so I want to know your input on that, because even though we want dads to come, and because he has a major important role. Well, what about the dads that say I'm coming, and then 2 seconds later they don't show, and then a month they call, oh, I want to see the baby, and then months later they don't see like, how do you support that? Because that's confusing.
Yeah, I appreciate the question. And because of the space of this presentation, I didn't get into it. So, but let me, which is why I appreciate the question. So when we're talking about paternal impact, it's any paternal positive figure. And so to directly answer your question in terms of supporting that, like, I don't. So if there's another positive male in this child's life, then the baby would benefit from that positive male. So, you know, in that situation, what would make sense to me would be a formal visitation plan. So that way the child grows up knowing, like, hey, this is when your dad is supposed to have you. If he don't show up, that's on him. You know what I'm saying? Like, we can't, you know what I mean? So this is when your dad's supposed to have you. If he don't show up, that's on him. But ensuring as best she can that there's a positive male figure in this child. So, and because that's why foster dads, stepdads, coaches, teachers, they can all have a very similar positive impact on a child's life. It doesn't have to be the biological father. And I make no excuses for biological fathers who are not doing the best thing for their children. I don't demonize them or shame them, but I definitely don't excuse them. I'm not apologetic for them. I don't give them another chance. It's rough out here. No, you're responsible for your kids, and we go through stuff and we got to figure it out. You know, I would tell dads all the time, oh, I'm tired when I come home from work. Can't be tired. Do some push-ups, do something. I don't know what it is, but you got to figure it out. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, you got to figure it out. The kids are here. They need you. You got to figure it out. So yeah, in that situation, specifically, I would be more inclined to get a formal type situation. So it can't be, oh, I'm a call and not show. It's like, no, this is when you're supposed to have them. So if you show up, great. If you don't, we move on to the next opportunity that you would have. And then in terms of the impact for the child, ensuring that there's a positive male figure to support that. So I know I'm running short on time. Here we go. So what do I say to sort of start these conversations? We want to make sure we have open-ended questions. You know, not just yes, no, open-ended questions. We want to be specific, right? If someone's concerned, again, about the mental health, how long have you experienced this, right? And when we say this, we want to be specific as to what they're talking about. We want to reflect the language used. If they say sad, we say sad. If they say bothered, we say bothered. We don't want to replace their language with clinical language or something that they may view as more stigmatizing. So if they say I was bothered, we don't want to then turn around and use a word like anxious. Or if they say I was sad or upset, we don't want to turn around and use a word like depression. We want to avoid jargon. We want to avoid opinions. Well, I think this, or I think that. Well, this, you know, it could be this, it could be that. We want to avoid that. We want to use I or experience statements, right? What I found to be in my experience when this occurs, it could be this. What I found in my experience to be helpful is this, right? So we don't want to tell people what to do. We don't even want to give advice or make suggestions. You need to do this, you should do that. We really want to speak to an experience place. Well, in my experience, this has worked for other people. It may work for you. In my experience, this may be a better solution. In my experience, this may do this and that, and really allow them to make their own decisions and be responsible. And there's appropriate personal disclosure, I think, is always a helpful tool. It's always a helpful tool. And again, it's appropriate, and it's to the situation, and it benefits the client, right? It benefits the family that we're working with to say, you know what? This and that I went through, or I had a family member that went through this and that, and this is sort of what worked for them, and this is how it worked. So these are things to sort of say in terms of having the conversation if we think additional supports may be needed. So referrals and resources. You know, there's obviously individual counseling, there's group counseling, more formal than this peer support group. Now, I know when people think referrals and resources, it's like, give me a place to send them. Give me a place so I can send them and they will, you know, benefit from. The reason why that is not included in this presentation is because oftentimes when we talk about working with men and fathers, they're attached to certain things. So the referral or resource may say we work with all dads in these situations, but when they get there, all of these dads may need employment. all of these dads may be re-entry. All of these dads, or majority of these dads, may have child protective services involved. So oftentimes the dad would go to this thing that said they were just a peer support group for dads, and they're like, oh, that's not me. So then they stop going, and then it really hurts the credibility of the referral process. But then next I'm like, I'm not gonna go to that. Last time they sent me that, it was all for dads who had DCFS cases. I don't have a DCFS case. It was all for dads who this and that. So when we talk about these things, we really want to be specific and personalize the resource and the referral source and really sort of vet that. Okay, we really want to sort of vet that. So I don't include them in my presentations because oftentimes people just send people places. And so like, oh, wait, I heard of this, you know, go there or try that out. So I can send some stuff to Patrick and Terry to sort of navigate that. But I just want people to know that's why they're not included in the presentation, because we really want to be clear and specific around those things. I think I'm over time. Oops, there we go. So we are at the time for the vignette. So in discussing the vignette, we want to look at what issues or concerns regarding the father are to be considered. What, if any, are the red flags? What, if any, are the diagnostic criteria presented, and to what degree do they cause concern? What questions should be asked and why to discern? If any additional resources should be provided? What cultural considerations are present to support any decision as to whether or not more conversations need to occur about possible referrals? So we are here. Thank you, Terry. She put the vignettes in the chat for everyone. Terry, do I do the breakout rooms, or how is that going to?
Oh, I have the breakout rooms.
Okay.
Good. We're saying them. I'm going to turn it over to Patrick to give the instructions moving forward.
All right, I will stop sharing. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you all for your questions too. So before we do the vignette, we're gonna give you guys a break because you guys have been working hard. So we're gonna take a break. It's 10:35 now. Is everyone cool with the 10-minute break? Just to get up, stretch, and then we'll come back to the vignettes and then we'll begin the breakout rooms. Is that okay? I see majority thumbs up. Yes, shaking head, shaking head, shaking head. Okay, cool. We'll do a 10-minute break. We'll see you at 10:45 and we'll begin then. Thank you.
Patrick, I apologize if I completely boat raced the time. I was.
You're all good, LeHenry. No, it works out. I understand, like, look, like while there's still, you know, stuff going on. I like the content is definitely what's important. So we're good.
Yeah, I feel like with the questions kept coming, I didn't want to sort of shut that down. So I'll do better for the in-person, I promise.